Hey there, everybody, and welcome to the Law&Crime Trial Network. I'm Jesse Weber, and thanks for joining us. Happening now, University of Idaho murder suspect Bryan Kohberger is doing court today for a status hearing. Kohberger now faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. And I'll tell you what, although there are no live streaming allowed of this hearing, we hope to get the footage from that courtroom as soon as possible and show it to you. We want you to be fully updated about what is happening in this case. Now, I will tell you, a lot of people across the nation are interested in this case. So what we are going to do is take questions from you, our viewers. So right now, submit all of your questions about this case on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. We'll get to as many as we possibly can. But before we even get to those questions, I want to take a look at something else. And I want to take a look at newly released body cam footage that shows one of the victims interacting with police after receiving noise complaints to their off-campus home. Now, this was a video from just months prior to the victim's death. So we're going to show you 2 different videos from August 16th, 2022, and also September 2nd, 2022. Let's take a look.
Go stairs to the back deck. Interesting.
How are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Is this your place?
Yeah.
Perfect. You know why we're here?
And I assume noise.
Noise, yeah.
Yeah.
Big speaker right there?
Yeah.
Nothing against having a party. Once neighbors start calling in, then we have an issue.
Fair.
You go to school?
Yeah.
Okay. What year?
Senior.
Senior. Okay. So I'll tell you the same thing I told them. You probably know the drill, right?
Actually, no.
Oh, okay. So usually, at least for me, I'll give you a verbal warning.
Okay.
Once I have neighbors calling in, your music's too loud, you're disturbing the peace.
Yeah.
Nothing against having parties, nothing against having people over who are overage to drink.
Mm-hmm.
But again, once we start disturbing the neighbors, then we've got an issue.
Yeah.
Noise ticket is up to 300.
Yeah, somewhere around 300, 400.
Okay, it's a pretty expensive ticket. I don't want to give that to you.
Yeah.
That being said, this is your place, so I'm going to hold you responsible. Because it is your place, you're also responsible for everybody here.
Yeah.
So I'm going to grab your info.
Yeah.
And if I do have to come back here, a $300-some ticket's coming your way.
Okay.
And it only gets more expensive from there. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's
Okay.
fair. Absolutely.
Actually, let's just do it this way. What's a good phone number for you? Is this 1122 here?
Yeah.
Okay. Sounds good. I'd much rather you spend that $300 on beer or something fun than a noise ticket, right?
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. That being said, warnings. Don't do it again.
Yep.
I'd hate to come back in a few hours and then have to issue that. So,
Yeah.
Any questions for me?
No.
All right. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Hello, miss.
Hello.
What's your name?
Xana.
Xana, do you live here?
Yes.
Okay, did Megan talk to you earlier?
No.
Okay, does Megan live here?
Megan. I do not have a Megan that lives
Megan Mogan?
here. Maddie Mogan, yes.
Madison Mogan? Yeah.
Madison Mogan? Okay, she does live here?
Sorry, she is at the club. She's 21. I'm just going to bed. I have a couple friends over, but
Okay.
this is my ID.
Have you talked to Maddie tonight?
Yes, I have.
Oh.
She's at the corner club.
Okay. Did she tell you anything about anything that happened earlier or anything like that?
Honestly, not really. I've just been here the past hour.
Okay. Okay.
Just trying to go to bed.
Can I grab your ID for me? If you
Yeah,
will run
I'm
her.
not 21.
Okay.
My roommates are 21. I just came to go to bed.
We're not here to talk about the alcohol stuff, okay?
Okay, yeah.
But this is the second noise complaint we've had here tonight within 2 hours.
I'm sorry
Okay.
about that.
So this time it was the blonde gal and the guy on the back porch playing music. Okay. So
I sincerely apologize about
Okay.
that. I'm just going to bed.
Okay.
So,
just so you understand, you could be getting a misdemeanor citation for this, which means you have to go in front of a judge and explain why you couldn't keep the people in your house quiet.
okay.
Okay? We've already talked to Maddie once and told her the same thing. Okay? The only reason she's not getting a ticket is because she's not standing here in front of me. But I'm telling you right now, if we have to come back, you're getting a ticket.
Okay, so
you
I'm
will have to
not
go
right
see a
now.
judge.
I'm fine right now.
You're not getting a ticket right now.
I'm just trying to go to bed right
Okay.
now. I mean, I understand you guys. You're coming here. I'm just going to bed.
Okay. Well, understand that you're responsible for the residents.
Okay.
So whoever else is here, if they have a safe way to get home, you need to kick them out. Or tell them to come inside and be quiet.
Okay.
Because the houses that are on this hill all the way around here, we can hear you from clear down the road when we were coming up here. We can hear the music.
Okay.
And that's
I'm so sorry.
we're past the
about that.
point of having polite conversations, okay?
Yeah.
Because
I'm so
neighbors are being
sorry.
kept up. Okay?
I'm sorry. It's just like, yeah.
So
The blonde gal and the guy up there, are they roommates too?
I'm sorry, what?
The blonde gal and the guy that's upstairs, are they roommates too?
None of my roommates are home. I'm the only one home. These are all my friends.
Okay. So do you understand 100%
I understand.
what's going to happen?
I'm just going to tell everyone, get the
No,
get the out or figure it out.
And I'm not saying that you got to tell everybody they have to leave, but I'm telling you, any outside music, any loud yelling needs to be done.
Okay.
Because we're not, next time you're getting a ticket.
Okay.
Okay? And if you get a misdemeanor citation, the university is not going to take kindly to it.
Yeah.
So not only do you have to go see a judge.
I've never had to deal with this ever.
Yep. And we don't want to start now. I don't ever remember having come here, so I understand you guys are having to get together, but people have a way of taking the invitation and using it as an excuse to get out of control and be loud.
Advantage. Yes,
exactly. Okay.
I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I just hope for your sake that your friends don't put you in a position where you get the citation and you have to go to court to defend yourself from your friend's behavior. Make sense?
Okay. Thank you so much.
You want to get a good phone number for her?
Yep. And just remember, the Dean of Students Office probably will be contacting you about this as well.
Okay.
Yep.
About student code of conduct
Okay.
issues.
Do you have my ID?
Yes, I have.
He's going to get your number.
What's a good telephone number for you?
Xana Kernodle. XANAKERNODLE.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Xana.
Of
Here's your
course.
ID back.
Thank you so much.
Any questions?
No questions.
Okay. Make sure your friends don't put you in a bad position. Tell them it's time to be done. Okay.
There's like no one in there.
Yeah.
anymore.
It was the two that were around the back. We had to holler at them to turn the music down. So,
Thank
alrighty.
you guys. I'm so sorry.
Nope, that's all right. You take care. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, let me bring my guests who are going to break everything down, and we'll take your questions. Again, keep them coming in. I'm joined right now by former FBI Special Agent Bobby Chacon and our very own Law and Crime reporter, Ann Jeanette Levy. It's great to have you both here. Bobby, I'll start with you. When we look at this footage, other than the fact that it's incredibly eerie to see these two young women speaking months before they're brutally killed, I'm wondering what the significance of this is for the investigation. I look at it as if this goes to the idea that this was a party house. Who was at the house? Was Bryan Kohberger ever at or near the house? And of course, that's complicated by the fact that there's no indication anybody knew him or saw him there, or even any of the victim's friends or the victims knew him. So I'm curious what you take away from that footage.
Well, in looking at the two of them together, the two pieces of footage together, sometimes in these houses, there are housemates that aren't necessarily close friends because they just find each other on a board, a bulletin board, or something where you kind of find a roommate or a housemate or something. It seems like there's a little bit of a disconnect between groups of friends. So you might have different groups of friends being there for different of the housemates, right? So it looks like there's a disconnect between one person that lives in the house knowing what's going on with another person in the house, and so this would lend itself to somebody looking at a stranger walking through a house and going, I don't know who that is, but it might be a friend of one of my housemates, because it doesn't seem like they were sometimes in the same circle of friends. Now, I know this is a small university, a small community, so they all probably knew each other in some ways. But taking those two together, it seems like there was a disconnect, and one's putting, and kids will do that. One will put it off on the other and stuff. But it seems to me that not only was this a party house, but as Xana was saying at the end, these are just my friends here, and she's about to go to bed, but her friends are going to. She's got a group of friends, but she said 3 or 4 times she's about to go to bed and her friends are still there. So maybe she goes to sleep and the friends still hang out. Maybe it was one of those houses where you come home and there's this group of people that you may or may not know very well, and the people there to see are asleep in their room or something. So it kind of made it seem to me, not only was it a party house, but that there were people there a lot of times that some of the housemates may not have been totally familiar with.
Yeah, right. And that's when, even before we knew the arrest of Kohberger, or, obviously the affidavit came out, we knew that one of the surviving roommates actually saw the alleged suspect. The questions of, well, if they, heard a scream or they heard some activity, would it have been that foreign for a college campus when people are coming in and out? And Jeanette, I'm going to bring you in here. I was going to ask you, what can we expect from the status hearing today? But I was beat to the punch by Deborah Stroud 10, who said, what is the sole purpose of a status hearing?
Well, really, the purpose of this status hearing, it can mean a lot of things at different points in a case. But for this one, Ann Taylor, the attorney for Bryan Kohberger, asked for a status hearing at the initial appearance last week because she said they were new to the case. And the judge had initially asked, hey, are we going to set a date for a preliminary hearing? And she requested a status hearing because they are new to the case. So they are only going to be basically setting a date today for a preliminary hearing if they don't waive the right to that hearing. Should they waive the right to a preliminary hearing, an arraignment will be scheduled. But if they want a preliminary hearing, and that's where the prosecution has to put on evidence to show that they have probable cause to arrest Bryan Kohberger, they believe he committed these crimes, and then the judge has to determine whether or not they've met that really low bar, the prosecution. They could want that hearing because they could want to question a detective who's put on the stand. There are any number of reasons why they may possibly want a preliminary hearing.
And we know at this point, Mr. Kohberger has not entered a plea as of yet, although the indication is that he is going to fight this. We know that his attorney has actually come forward and done an interview and said that they believe there are holes in the probable cause affidavit. Bobby, I'll go to you. We have a question from Des DTS talking about the potential preliminary hearing that Anjanette mentioned where the government would come forward with the evidence of probable cause. If there is a preliminary hearing, Bobby, Des DS asks, will DM need to testify? Now, DM is that surviving roommate that was mentioned in the affidavit who allegedly saw the suspect. You tell me, will DM need to testify?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that the preliminary hearing is kind of like an in-person version of the affidavit that we've all seen, where a magistrate has said there were a probable cause to move forward. In that affidavit, as you saw, the DM was allowed what we call hearsay, right? So it's not the witness themselves saying it, it's the detective saying, I interviewed this person and they said this. I think, if I'm not mistaken, at a preliminary hearing, they can introduce hearsay into the record. Eventually, of course, at court, in a court of law before a jury, hearsay is not allowed. And hearsay is just me saying what I heard from somebody else and not hearing it directly from that person. So I think that hearsay would be allowed in a preliminary hearing. Again, it's a very early stage. He hasn't even been officially arraigned on the charges yet and entered a plea. So I think that what you'll see is the detective that swore out the affidavit take the stand and go through what you saw in that affidavit.
And some preliminary hearings longer than others. Some almost seem like a mini trial within a trial. Not quite the situation here, but maybe. I want to go more to our questions from YouTube. We have Mike Johnson and Jeanette who says, please explain the difference from the gag order from the order to seal. There's been a lot of confusion over this. If you can do your best, Anjanette, to explain what the difference is between the gag order that was issued by the judge with respect to any comments made by people connected to the case and the order to seal with respect to certain documents.
Well, gag orders happen sometimes in high-profile cases, and that basically says that members of the prosecution and members of the defense, police, investigators for the defense can't make comments outside of court. They can't grant interviews where they're saying, we think Bryan Kohberger is guilty because of this, that, and the other. Or the defense says he's innocent and, the police messed up because of this. And I'm just giving an example there. So it just covers statements made out of court, not documents filed within the court. A document being sealed, such as the search warrants in this case, that's different. That just means that those documents can't be seen by anybody right now, except for the people who filled them out and the people in the courts. They're usually placed in some type of envelope, so they, can't be viewed. So that just means there's information in there that we want to keep secret, and we believe there are reasons why, and they have to present the court with reasons why they're requesting a document to be sealed. There is an apartment, the apartment belonging to Bryan Kohberger in Pullman, Washington, a short distance from Moscow, Idaho. The search warrant in that case remains sealed until, I believe, March 1st of this year. And they were saying they obtained this search warrant back on December 30th, I think, or maybe it even been the 29th before the arrest was made. And they were afraid that they might tip off the suspect should it be revealed and be open for public inspection. So they were looking to protect the investigation, protect law enforcement. And so that is why that document can't be viewed at this point in time. So gag order covers statements documents are covered by a seal by the court.
All right, thanks for that, Anjanette. What we're going to do is going to take a break. Again, we're carefully monitoring any updates that we're getting from that status hearing that is happening, and we will let you know the latest on that. We will take more of your questions, and Bobby, I'll tell you, I got a great question lined up about evidence in this case, so we'll take a quick break. We'll be right back right after this. All right, welcome back, everybody. So we're covering the case of Bryan Kohberger. Specifically, there was a status hearing that was held today. We hopefully will get that video to you very shortly. We do have an update regarding this status hearing. It is concluded, and the main takeaways from the status hearing is that a preliminary hearing has been set for June 26th at 9 a.m., and that no bail was granted for Mr. Kohberger, and it appears that he has waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing. Bobby, I'll go to you on this. June feels like a long time away to have a preliminary hearing. As we talked about before, that is where the prosecutor will present the evidence of probable cause, and then from there, the case will continue. You know, if he pleads ultimately not guilty, there's going to be, although there'll be an arraignment, then he could plead not guilty. This case will proceed to a trial date. But June 26th, so many months away to have a preliminary hearing. Does that surprise you?
Yeah, it shocks me, actually. Because, look, the hearing schedules are set in a way to allow the attorneys on each side to prepare what they need to prepare for whatever that hearing is going to cover. A preliminary hearing is not going to cover a lot of substance. And so, sometimes you have evidentiary hearings that are set kind of out because the defense wants time to consult an expert or something. Whatever that, each hearing has a particular topic that they cover and a particular thing that gets accomplished. And a preliminary hearing in this kind of case, it's not going to require a whole lot of work on the sides of the attorneys. It's really a format thing. It's pro forma. And it really shocks me that it's 6 months out, because these attorneys don't have a lot to do to prepare for that particular hearing.
So, Anjanette, I'll give you an opportunity to respond to that as well and give you a reaction to the fact that this preliminary hearing was now been set for June. He waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing. No bail was set. But I also do want to throw another question out to you from one of our viewers. I believe this is Corey from YouTube. How is Bryan's DNA tied to his father? I'm assuming the trash, right? Can they verify the DNA is actually his father's? I'm a little confused on that. Corey, I'll say, don't feel bad about that, because the wording in the affidavit was a little strange. Anjanette, I'll throw it to you.
Well, as far as the preliminary hearing goes, it does seem like a long way off. They've filed a request for discovery. His attorneys have, so maybe they'll get to look at some of that before the prelim. I don't know, but they have filed that request. But 6 months seems like a long time. As far as the DNA goes, they must have had some reason to believe that this was Michael Kohberger's DNA. They went through the trash, they said in the affidavit. And there was some talk here that genetic genealogy was used. And that's when you send your DNA sample in to, one of these companies. They determine who you might be related to. They can determine your ancestry, things like that. So there were some, there's been some reporting that was used in this case, but it wasn't in the affidavit. And I actually spoke with a woman who's an expert in that. And she said oftentimes it is left out of an affidavit. So is it possible they got his DNA from one of those sites and then compared it to the trash and then made the conclusion from there? I don't know.
You might be right. I'm going to cut you off right there. I just got word we have the hearing now, the status hearing for Bryan Kohberger. Let's watch it. Okay. I got misinformation. We're going to continue on with this, Anjanette. Let me throw back to you for a second. Sorry, we cut you off there. So again, you were saying that it's not foreign that we wouldn't have that in the actual probable cause affidavit, because again, just because it's a probable cause affidavit, there is a lot more evidence that they can get between now and when a trial happens, and it's not everything is revealed in the affidavit, correct, Anjanette?
Right. I mean, the affidavit, and I thought there might be a good amount of information in there, only because I've seen that happen in big cases before, where they put a good amount in there to show, look, this is solid. And this is a high profile case. It's a quadruple homicide. It doesn't get any more serious than this. This isn't like a disorderly conduct case or something like that, or some type of assault case. I'm trying to think of other crimes for which you might have something like this. So they may be able to find out more information about some of the evidence. I think this was kind of a gloss over, even though it was 19 pages. So they'll see if there's anything in there that's, looks worse for Bryan Kohberger, or if there are things in that evidence, and it will be voluminous. Keep that in mind. It's going to be a lot for them to go through, that maybe is exculpatory, that makes him look less like a suspect.
Sure.
I mean, it looks pretty damning at this point in time. But yeah, so I think that they might want more get a look at what they can at this point.
And Bobby, I think they have more. I think there's going to be more evidence, Bobby. And the reason I say that, let's go to I'll tell you what, Bobby, I'll hold off on that question. Really wanted to get it to you. We'll hold off on this question. This is the status hearing that we were talking about. Let's dip in and watch it. Okay, so we were waiting for Mr. Kohberger to enter the room for this status hearing. Bobby, now I can ask you my question that I was going to ask you. I might have to cut you off if we hear this. This is from Postcards from Protest on YouTube. Killing someone with a knife is a very messy way of killing, and this killer killed 4 people that way. There's no way there's no forensic cross-contamination. There's got to be more, right? There's got to be more evidence there.
Well, yeah, that's 2 different questions, really. Cross-contamination is a term we use to say that, the DNA from one person, the forensic material from one person is combined with another.
All right, so Bobby, we'll pick this up on the other side. Let's jump in and listen to the status hearing.
All right, good morning. We are on the record. 29222805. This is State of Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger. Mr. Kohberger is in custody. He is appearing here in court with his attorneys, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Logsdon, Mr. Thompson, Ms. Jennings appearing on behalf of the state. This is the time set in the matter for the preliminary hearing status conference. So I am going to inquire of counsel. Ms. Taylor, what's the status at this time?
Thank you, Your Honor. We are going to ask the court to set preliminary hearing out into June. We would request the 3rd or 4th week of June and probably 4 or 5 days for preliminary hearing. Mr. Kohberger understands his right to a timely preliminary hearing, and he's willing to waive the timeliness to allow us time to obtain discovery in this case and be prepared.
And Mr. Thompson, are you in agreement with that?
The state has no objection to that, Your Honor. Ms. Taylor reached out to us by email yesterday with her proposal. On reflection, the state's calendar would be better in the month of July, but we will make the end of June work if that's the court's preference. And I haven't had a chance to talk with Ms. Taylor about that. I'm sorry, I know that's last minute.
That's okay. The court's calendar is going to be better towards the end of June, early July. So would that work, Ms. Taylor, for your scheduling on your other matters?
Your Honor, yes. If we take that 4th week in June, that's actually best.
Okay. So, Mr. Kohberger, I need to speak to you for a moment then. Sir, you do understand, and Ms. Taylor has represented here, that she's advised you of your right to have, or fully discussed with you, the right that you have, which is to have your preliminary hearing within 14 days of the date that you initially appeared before this court. As you recall, when I advised you of your rights, that hearing is a probable cause hearing where the state has to establish that more likely than not, these felony offenses were committed and you were the one that committed the felony offenses. If you waive your right to a speedy preliminary hearing, it does not mean that you're giving up your right to have a preliminary hearing. It simply means that you would not be able to come back and challenge that the state did not present probable cause within 14 days. Do you understand?
Yes.
Have you had enough time to speak with Ms. Taylor about your decision to waive your right to a speedy preliminary hearing?
Yes.
Do you need any additional time to do so?
No.
Then I will ask at this time, as to the 5 counts, felony counts that were charged in the criminal complaint that was filed on December 29th of 2022, are you waiving your right to a speedy preliminary hearing and agreeing that that hearing can be held outside the 14-day period?
Yes.
And Ms. Taylor, do you concur with his waiver?
I do, Your Honor. Thank you.
I will find your waiver of speedy preliminary hearing is knowing, intelligently, voluntarily entered here in open court with the assistance of counsel. We will go ahead and set the matter for preliminary hearing. Beginning Monday, June 26th at 9:00 a.m. And I will go ahead and reserve the week, so June 26th to June 30th, in the event that we need all 5 days for presentation of evidence. And just so counsel knows, it will begin at 9 a.m. each of those days. Is there anything further to address at this time in the case, Mr. Thompson?
Not from the state's perspective, Your Honor, no.
All right. Or Ms. Taylor?
No, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Kohberger, then you will be remanded into custody on your same no bail at this point in time, pending further proceedings. Again, we'll send notice out to counsel, and we will be in recess for this morning.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Okay, so relatively short there, as we said. June 26th will be the preliminary hearing at 9 a.m. No bail, and he waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing. I'll get some real-time perspective on this. So, Bobby, we had talked about this, but now you saw that it was defense counsel who said, how about June? They proposed June, but no objection from the prosecution. What'd you think?
Well, I think the thing that struck me most was the defense saying that they were going to need 4 or 5 days for this hearing, which is, to me, a long time for a probable cause hearing. It tells me that I think, and I probably will reverse my answer earlier, that you may see DM on the stand. It seems to me that defense intends to challenge and vigorously challenge some of the probable cause that was put into that affidavit. That's what it tells me. I think we will see more than just the one detective who swore to the warrant. I think you will see more witnesses. The defense kind of indicated to me that this is going to be a hard-fought preliminary hearing.
Yeah, we're getting more questions now on YouTube in reaction to this. Carrie G asks, is he imprisoned until June then? Well, he is going to remain at the Latah County Jail. No bail has been issued. And Jeanette, I go to you. Swagner91 says, wonder why he has cuts on his face. I didn't notice that. And Jeanette, did you notice anything out of his appearance? And also, I'll throw this out to you as well. When he was arrested, his booking photo, did you notice anything outward about his appearance? Anything that would, be a bit strange considering what he is accused of doing?
I didn't, not from the booking photo. I mean, he looked a little more, pensive in the one from Latah County than the one from Monroe County, Pennsylvania. But I did not notice these cuts, but I did receive a text while we were watching that from somebody saying, wow, it looks like he got into a fight. And I said, oh, really? I texted the person back. I didn't see that. So the person then responded, maybe it's just some, shaving injuries. It was our understanding that he was going to be kept away from other inmates in the jail. So I think we'll have to kind of rewind and look at that again to see what we see. There is a dog that clearly wants to have a say in this conversation, and I think that dog should be heard in this conversation. But hey, I don't make the rules. Bobby, let me throw it over to you.
Jesse, I saw like a line that looked like a cut on his chin, and then more of a round bruise or blood spot here. Mm-hmm. There was like one linear one and one kind of round, like dime-shaped one there that I kind of noticed on his face. You see that under his jaw is the kind of dime-shaped one, and then the front of his mouth, you see a linear kind of scratch or something. Well, I mean, it's speculation what that could be. I mean, I didn't notice that before. I don't know what the jail conditions are like. I mean, I don't know what it could be from. I would imagine, Bobby, he's under constant supervision, probably under suicide watch. I'll throw this out to you as well, because we didn't get a chance to elaborate on before. Again, postcards from protests said, killing someone with a knife is a very messy way of killing. And the killer killed 4 people that way. There's no way there's no forensic cross-contamination. In other words, it seems to me there's probably more evidence here, whether it's in his house or in his car or on his clothes. There's got to be more here considering the gravity of this attack, right, Bobby? Yeah, absolutely. And I think what the questioner is asking, and I think it's probably correct, is that he probably carried the DNA. So if you consider 2 different murder sites, because 2 victims were together in one place and 2 victims were together in another, he probably carried some of the DNA from the first murder scene to the second murder scene. I know the whole place is a murder scene, but when he killed the first 2 victims and then he attacked the second 2 victims, there's probably DNA from that first killing in the air of the second killing. But the lab is very good at kind of parsing that stuff out. It takes a while in the laboratory setting to take all of those samples, blood samples, other DNA type samples, and kind of separating it all out. That's why I was so surprised that the case was resolved this quickly with the suspect, because it takes time to separate blood and different blood samples from one particular sample and into different DNA profiles. And I think the lab has done a good job probably at kind of showing the DNA as it travels through that house. And it's my understanding they came forward with this without even finding the murder weapon. So, Ann Jeanette, I'll throw 2 questions to you. One is from Moses Obregon. Did they find the murder weapon yet? I don't believe they have. And I'll throw another question to you from Eddie Sando from Facebook. Did law enforcement follow Kohberger's route after the murders where he went south before he returned to Pullman? I wonder if they found his clothes and the knife. Well, as far as we know, they haven't found
the murder weapon, which they believe to be a K-bar fixed blade knife. I'm assuming they have traveled that route based on what they believe it was from the cell phone pings. But that's a lot of land to cover. There's been a lot of speculation about the Snake River was something placed there. Also, it appeared that his phone was in another part of Idaho the next day. So have they gone to that part of Idaho? I think it's Johnson, Idaho, and looked there. I mean, we're talking about a very circuitous route that they are alleging. You know, it's almost like a U shape to get back from the Moscow area to Pullman, and he went south, west, and then north. So that's a lot of ground to cover. Maybe they have I know they can triangulate and they can do different things with cell phone pings, possibly GPS to pinpoint locations. So because of the gag order, we just don't know. We can't ask those questions. We can ask, but they won't be answered. And the search warrants remain sealed. You're not going to have to get a search warrant to search, a public wooded area or what have you. But I'm sure something like that has probably gone on. Bobby would probably know better than I would on that.
So, Bobby, I'll throw that to you as well, and also throw another question to you. Lucky13 from YouTube, has there been any military link due to the supposed knife used? In that affidavit, they mentioned that the knife sheath that was left at the crime scene was K-bar, United States military. This is actually interesting, United States Marine. This is actually interesting because we, Anjanette and I, host the Sidebar podcast, and one of our guests, weeks before the arrest of Bryan Kohberger, suggested it was a possible, K-bar style knife, and maybe look into military people. And so I haven't seen anything that there's a military link, but Bobby, I throw it to you.
Yeah, first the route. I have no doubt that the investigators have traveled the route. Every route that is on his pings, on his cell phone data, and the video that they captured. I have no doubt that they have step-by-step walked through his entire route that they theorize is his route. And the knife, as far as the knife goes, it's a military-style knife, but you can buy that in an Army-Navy store. You can buy that in a lot of places with the military imprint, the Marine Corps, whatever it be, burned in or imprinted into the sheath. So, I think if there was a military connection, certainly if Kohberger had ever served in the military or even tangentially been involved with the military, I think, that would have come out by now. People would have, not only the police, even if they didn't announce it, somebody would have found that in his background. And so I don't think he has a connection to the military. I think he just used what we call a military style knife, because the military does issue that sometimes. I've had a K-bar knife myself, and it had some military insignia on it because that's the way I bought it. But I think that I haven't seen any. I'd be surprised if it hasn't come out by now. I'd be surprised if it's there.
Jesse, can I just add to that
Sure.
I found them on Amazon the other night. So the K-bar with the sheath and the USMC emblem and everything. So it seems like they're pretty common. Relatively easy to purchase. Anjanette, I actually want to throw to something that you did. You did an interview with Shannon Gray, who is the attorney for the Gonsalves family, and something that we addressed earlier, and we're going to get to more of our viewers' questions, but about the surviving roommate seeing the suspect inside of the home. I think this is an interesting perspective from Mr. Gray. Let's take a look.
We all have to remember that she is a victim in this case. I don't know if anybody can, everyone's there to second guess what happened and how she should have or could have reacted. She states I think in the affidavit that she froze in that moment and then went back in her room and ultimately the 911 call wasn't made until later, 8 hours later, I believe, or something along those lines. But who knows? I mean, maybe she saw him and maybe she thought he was going out for a smoke out on the deck and coming back in. Who knows what was going through her mind? But I don't think anybody should be putting any blame or anything on her about anything. And the family feels the same way. She's going through a traumatic incident where she had 4 roommates that were murdered. She was able to garner some information that helped out the affidavit, the identification of the black clothes, of the black mask over his nose, the bushy eyebrows, approximate height, approximate build, very critical to the investigation. I mean, if they bring in a guy that's 6'6" and doesn't match the description, right, then you have a different but it seems in line with what the defendant looks like in this case to a certain degree. So, and maybe they find dark clothes and they find a dark mask in some of the locations that they've done. So she's really, I think everyone should be praising her for getting an identification and being able to give that solid information there and not look about what she might have or could have done, because we have no idea what mental state she was going through at that time. It's easy to criticize. It's harder to be kind nowadays. So, everybody's got their idea of what could have, should have, or would have done, and just show her some kindness and grace. If I'm pretty sure no one's more critical than she is of herself on things. So I don't think anybody needs to beat her up and anything. And the reality of it is she's providing really great evidence regarding the identification of the defendant in the case. And that's pivotal. I think it is pivotal in a prosecution, having someone that can give an identification of the general, build and what he looks like and things like that. So
I personally think he's 100% right. I mean, will the opportunity come at a trial for Bryan Kohberger if DM takes the stand for his attorneys to cross-examine what exactly she saw? Why didn't this was reported until 8 hours later? Sure, but at this point, reserve criticism. You don't have the full story about what happened. And Jeanette, I'll throw it to you. What else did you learn from your interview with Mr. Gray?
Well, I just learned that they understand that this is going to be a long process. I mean, look, the homicides happened in November, the arrest in late December. We now have a preliminary hearing set for late June. It could be a long, long haul as they move through this whole process. I mean, the trial, if it goes to trial, may not be for a couple of years. There's a long way to go with this. And it also sounds like the Gonsalveses are just, grateful for seeing an arrest made. They believe that this is the right person. And they also want the death penalty in this case. They believe that is the proper punishment, should there be a conviction.
All right, we're going to take more of your questions. Stay with us here on Law and Crime. We'll be right back right after this. And welcome back, everybody, to our special coverage of Bryan Kohberger's status hearing, which happened earlier today. We learned that a preliminary hearing in the case has been set for June 26th at 9 a.m. There is no bail, and he has waived his right to a speedy preliminary hearing. We're taking your questions right now about this whole case. Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, submit them for the next 15 minutes or so. I'll do my very best to try to answer your questions here on the air with my A-star panel, Bobby Chacon and Jeanette Levy. Bobby, I'll go to you. Postcards from Protest on YouTube asks, the reports about his phone. Turned it off inside the house, but not when he drove there or drove away. Circumstantial stuff like this adds up to cross that beyond reasonable doubt eventually. I think I get what was being trying to be said. Is that what's your interpretation of that phone evidence? In my perspective, I think it's pretty devastating. Just because the fact that the phone was not on and near the crime scene when it happened, the fact that it was on as he's going, leaving, allegedly leaving where he was living, driving towards the house, it turns off right before the killings and turns right back on after the killings at 4:48, and then makes its way, along with the evidence of the car, back to the Washington State University campus. I think that was devastating, the phone evidence. What's your take on it?
Yeah, I agree with you and with postcards. I think that, I think they'll do a detailed analysis of his phone long before and long after the incident, and they'll show like this phone is never off for 3 hours. It's off for a couple of hours, I think, or surrounding the murders. So I think they'll show like this is the only time that this phone ever doesn't ping for this period of time, which is devastating, right? He made it. He was thinking that if I turn it off, it won't put me in the. But now it actually looks bad for him. And the question is correct in saying that, with circumstantial evidence, it's the accumulation, right? It's the totality of it. It's not the one particular piece. I see people picking apart little pieces, but before a jury and during a long trial, it's the totality of that circumstantial evidence that's built. It's an accumulation thing. It builds and builds and builds to the point where a juror reaches that point beyond any reasonable doubt because of the amount of it. It's not necessarily the quality or the attackability of any particular piece of evidence, but it's the accumulation of that circumstantial evidence that then gives rise to that beyond reasonable doubt standard. And I think in this case, the phone records are going to be part of that accumulation and a big part of it.
And Jeanette, I'm going to go to Melissa Dotson from YouTube, has a question for you specifically. Bobby, don't get jealous. It's okay. There's a lot of questions for you here. This one's for Anjanette. When you were in the area, Anjanette, were the neighbors or friends talking to you or other press? The gag order doesn't apply to anyone in the area, only those direct to the case, right?
That's right, Jesse. And we tried to talk to some people who lived in the immediate area of that home. And they were people that we were pretty sure knew the victims in this case. And I know one in particular did not want to talk with us. She seemed very harried and in a hurry, not wanting to speak. And you can understand that, right? I mean, this is something that is terrifying, that is horrific, that has happened. So we did our best to try to find people who would talk with us. But there are a lot of people who just don't want to talk about this, especially if they knew the victims. There were people saying, they were trying to respect the families of the victims in this case. And they felt like if somebody was going to say something, it was going to be up to them to do so.
Okay, so this is a question we have, Bobby, about the status hearing that we just saw. This is from TLK Thunder on YouTube. Can you please respond to this? Did you notice how confident Bryan Kohberger was? That's an interpretation when he was asked certain questions by the judge, if he seemed confident. Now, we know behind the scenes that his team is going to feels pretty confident that there's holes in the probable cause affidavit. They seem to fight it. Did you notice a sense of confidence in Bryan Kohberger?
Well, certainly, I don't know if I would say confidence, but I think you could term it that way. I thought it was assertive. I thought it was strong. I thought at one point that he was probably coached by his attorney to use one-word answers. In other words, he didn't say no, Your Honor, yes, Your Honor. He just said no or yes to the questions. And it seemed like, yeah, he did have a certain assertiveness to his voice, or confidence in his voice. His voice didn't crack. He didn't speak too low. He spoke loud and clear and firm. It struck me like he was well coached by his attorney in that respect, and that he didn't offer any other small words or anything. It was just yes or no, very, very tight, not anything superfluous, very to the point. And the thing that struck me is, as he was talking, I'm like, oh yeah, his attorney, I think, told him yes or no questions to the judge, answer loud, answer clear, answer confident, and that's what struck me. Yeah.
We are getting your questions in real time, so it's not like we had an opportunity to prepare for them. Anjanette, I give you that warning because you have been so dedicated on the case of Bryan Kohberger. The question becomes, have we even paid attention to what's been happening with Ashley Gillard? Remember, that is that TikToker who accused a University of Idaho professor, Rebecca Schofield, as being the real killer. This is before the arrest of Kohberger. The question from Y Spurful from YouTube: how is court handling that TikToker falsely accusing Rebecca of being the murderer and that Bryan is innocent? How do you handle this kind of delusional behavior? What's the very latest that you know, Anjanette, if you know anything?
You know, that's a really good question. And I feel like I just got a tip or a reminder to look into that. I'm not exactly sure. The last time we looked at it, you know, it was the suit had been filed, the defamation claim. So we need to check in on that and see what's going on and maybe check in on these TikTok videos. It really seemed like there was more going on with this woman than just, hey, I have a hunch. It seemed almost like an obsession with this idea that it was this professor. Police are saying it's not. So I think that you know, we should probably look at that. But I'd be interested to see how that case proceeds.
It's a catch-22 because, like, at the same time, do you want to give more attention to these false claims? So don't blame Anjanette if she doesn't have the update to that. We're focusing on the real case here. And speaking of the real case, Bobby, this is a good question. This is from David Rava from YouTube. What evidence is it likely that the police has that they didn't release yet? What do you think?
Well, that's a great question, David. And I think the first thing that I think of is probably, and hopefully they have more DNA. You know, they have the DNA that an earlier questioner asked about, you know, cross-contamination. I think they do have more DNA. That, I think, is still being tested, and results are still coming in. I think they got to a point with the DNA that they had, which was enough to reach the probable cause threshold for the arrest warrant, but I think that they are continuing to examine in the laboratory the DNA from all the scenes from the different parts of that house, and I think that they probably have more of that. I don't know that they have another eyewitness. I assumed when I first read the affidavit, or even before the affidavit, that they had some type of eyewitness before moving forward. But I think that they probably have more DNA evidence that's being, you know, slowly coming in. The results are slowly coming in, being analyzed, and then the investigators take that result and they kind of try to put the puzzle pieces together. I certainly think that that's a lot more of the evidence, and I'm hoping that's the case.
Okay, so Anjanette, we're running a little low on time, but I'm going to get two more questions to you. They're the same, very similar. One is from Mrs. Muerta. We've heard conflicting information about if Bryan has a connection to the victims. Do you know what it is yet? And then we have from Melissa Alt, has there been any connection established between Bryan Kohberger and any persons either in the neighborhood or at the college?
To our knowledge, no. And we spoke with Shannon Gray, or at least I exchanged some emails with him yesterday asking, you know, has a connection been found? Because there were some statements made where there might be a possible connection, things of that nature, between Kaylee Gonsalves and Bryan Kohberger. Shannon Gray now says, he says plainly that Kaylee did not know Bryan Kohberger, but he also said any information they have, they've given to Moscow PD. He didn't know, obviously, and I kind of thought maybe they had spoken with the other victims' families, but he said they wouldn't know if any of the others were familiar with him, had crossed paths with him in any sort of way. So at this point in time, we just don't know, and I don't think we're going to learn that, at least not from police or prosecutors right now, because there's a gag order, unless something pops up in a court document.
Yeah, Bobby, we have a question from Anthony Swanson. We have about 30 seconds left. If somebody pleads guilty, does that automatically eliminate the possibility of a death penalty, or is that only per a plea deal? Not necessarily, unless you said it was part of a plea deal. I would be curious, that 30 seconds, do you think prosecutors are going to pursue the death penalty here?
I do think they're going to. I mean, it meets all the structural definitions of seeking a death penalty. All the things that you need to seek the death penalty in Idaho are present in this case. Yeah. I think that the families want it, at least some of the families want it. And I think that this is such a such a horrific crime on innocent people that it's going to call out for the death penalty.
You might be very well right. Bobby Chacon and Jeanette Levy, thank you both so much for coming on. And everyone, thank you so much for submitting your questions. Great as always. I'm signing off. Michelle Yu is up next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Yu, and welcome to the Law and Crime Trial Network. I'll be with you the next 3 hours, taking you through the latest trial news happening around our country. To kick off today's show, we head to a status hearing for the man accused of murdering 4 students from the University of Idaho. As you may know, Bryan Kohberger was arrested for the brutal slayings of the students who were found in their off-campus home back in November. Now, Kohberger faces 4 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of felony burglary. The 28-year-old defendant appeared in an Idaho courtroom this morning for a status hearing, so stay with us while we listen in.
All right.
Right, good morning. We are on the record. 29222805. This is State of Idaho versus Bryan Kohberger. Mr. Kohberger is in custody. He is appearing here in court with his attorneys, Ms. Taylor, Mr. Logsdon, Mr. Thompson, Ms. Jennings appearing on behalf of the state. This is the time set in the matter for the preliminary hearing status conference. So I am going to inquire of counsel. Ms. Taylor, what's the status at this time?
Thank you, Your Honor. We are going to ask the court to set preliminary hearing out into June. We would request the 3rd or 4th week of June and probably 4 or 5 days for preliminary hearing. Mr. Kohberger understands his right to a timely preliminary hearing, and he's willing to waive the timeliness to allow us time to obtain discovery in this case and be prepared.
And Mr. Thompson, are you in agreement with that?
The state has no objection to that, Your Honor. Ms. Taylor reached out to us by email yesterday with her proposal. On reflection, the state's calendar would be better in the month of July, but we will make the end of June work if that's the court's preference. And I haven't had a chance to talk to Ms. Taylor about that. I'm sorry, I know that's last minute.
That's okay. The court's calendar is going to be better towards the end of June, early July. So would that work, Ms. Taylor, for your scheduling on your other matters?
Your Honor, yes. If we take that 4th week in June, that's actually best.
Okay. So, Mr. Kohberger, I need to speak to you for a moment then. Sir, you do understand, and Ms. Taylor has represented here, that she's advised you of your right to have, or fully discussed with you the right that you have, which is to have your preliminary hearing within 14 days of the date that you initially appeared before this court. As you recall, when I advised you of your rights, that hearing is a probable cause hearing where the state has to establish that more likely than not, these felony offenses were committed and you were the one that committed the felony offenses. If you waive your right to a speedy preliminary hearing, it does not mean that you're giving up your right to have a preliminary hearing. It simply means that you would not be able to come back and challenge that the state did not present probable cause within 14 days. Do you understand?
Yes.
Have you had enough time to speak with Ms. Taylor about your decision to waive your right to a speedy preliminary hearing?
Yes.
Do you need any additional time to do so?
No.
Then I will ask at this time, as to the 5 counts, felony counts that were charged in the criminal complaint that was filed on December 29th of 2022, are you waiving your right to a speedy preliminary hearing and agreeing that that hearing can be held outside the 14-day period?
Yes.
And Ms. Taylor, do you concur with his waiver?
I do, Your Honor. Thank you.
I will find your waiver of speedy preliminary hearing is knowing, intelligently, voluntarily entered here in open court with the assistance of counsel. We will go ahead and set the matter for preliminary hearing. Beginning Monday, June 26th at 9:00 a.m. And I will go ahead and reserve the week, so June 26th to June 30th, in the event that we need all 5 days for presentation of evidence. And just so council knows, it will begin at 9 a.m. each of those days. Is there anything further to address at this time in the case, Mr. Thompson?
Not from the state's perspective, Your Honor, no.
All right. Or Ms. Taylor?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. Mr. Kohberger, then you will be remanded into custody on your same no bail at this point in time, pending further proceedings. Again, we'll send notice out to council, and we will be in recess for this morning.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
A rather quick status hearing, and these types of hearings are generally to set up future court dates and to establish whether or not there is sufficient probable cause to charge the defendant with the felony. And with that, I am joined this afternoon by criminal defense attorneys Marie Pereira and Josh Ritter. Thank you both for coming on the show with me as always. Let's talk Idaho, guys. What do we generally get out of these status hearings, and was there anything out of the norm in this one? Josh, I'm going to start with you.
No, it's pretty standard. This is really just to check in on everybody's calendar to make sure that this hearing is going to last 4 to 5 days, which is fairly long for a preliminary hearing. Usually they're a day or so, even with murder, but this is a more involved case. So 4 or 5 days, they just have to make sure that their calendars are clear to handle something like that. We didn't learn a whole lot more other than the defense is willing to waive a considerable amount of time to have the prelim, which is not surprising, too, with the seriousness of this case. This could potentially be a death penalty case. The state hasn't made a determination on that yet, but it's no surprise that the defense wants to take their time to review all the evidence before they put on the prelim.
Marie, what did you take out of that status hearing?
I wasn't surprised that he waived the time. I agree with Josh 100% because you know what? It is sort of like a fact-finding mission, and both sides are going to be looking to see what the other has. And usually, the defense wants a preliminary hearing to see how much do they really have to really say, okay, there's more than probable cause and we're advancing this felony to the point where we're going to trial.
If there should be new details that come out regarding Bryan Kohberger, how is that going to affect what's going to happen next?
If the new details favor the prosecutorial standpoint, you know what? They will definitely bring it up at the preliminary hearing. This is a fluid, ongoing investigation, and anything that happens, even at this point, is going to be relevant towards the prosecution or defense. I mean, he could, you know, facts could come out that make it look like he didn't do it, and the DA has to present that too if that in fact happens.
Well, Josh, have you heard anything that really stands out to you in terms of details? I mean, we obviously know that he was lurking around the area on November 13th, and we're getting the body cam footage of a noise complaint with one of the victims back in September. Not too many things that are really incriminating, but is there anything that has stuck out to you?
The affidavit was pretty incredible to me in how multi-layered it was. They didn't just go off of cell phone evidence, but they used the cell phone evidence. They used surveillance video. They used GPS tracking, all of this to put together this narrative of where he was, how long he had been going to that location, what connection he may have had with the victims, where he went afterwards, the fact that he turned his phone off, the DNA evidence on the knife sheath. All of these are the little pieces that you put together, because this is primarily a circumstantial case in the sense that no one actually witnessed the murders. Now, we have an eyewitness who saw someone matching his description leaving the apartment, which is very shocking to that revelation when that came out. But other than that, it's really just going to be pieced together with all this circumstantial evidence.
I know we've talked about the witness from that affidavit on the show before, but Marie, we haven't talked about it because you haven't been on with me recently. But, you know, we were talking about this right before the show. You bring a very interesting perspective. I mean, a lot of people have talked about how she was frozen in fear, and that's why she hid in her room and she didn't say anything. But is that just an easy out? I mean, look, none of us were there at that time. However, that's a long time for you not to do anything, is it?
I think it is, and I was shocked when I heard that he actually walked past her, and in the probable cause affidavit, it said she heard noises, she heard crying, she heard unusual noises. Now, I understand, you know, these kids are young and they mind their business. Things go on in different people's rooms and you're not trying to get in anybody's business. But clearly she was afraid when she saw the stranger pass by. I'm shocked that she didn't text one of them, go in the room to look, because the fact is, if she had done that, maybe lives could have been saved. It took hours for them to discover the body. People were bleeding out in that time. And I'm not trying to blame the little girl, but that was really poor judgment on her part. Why did you not check on them or call the police or something?
Josh, do you agree with that, or do you agree with that theory that sometimes you're just so frozen in fear you really can't do anything?
Yeah, I agree with Marie. You know, you don't want to blame her. I've never been in that position. Who knows how any one of us would react? But it's shocking and it's confusing, because you are wondering, well, if you were scared, then what were you doing in those minutes and hours that passed? Why weren't you checking on anyone? Why weren't you calling anyone? Why weren't you, telling your other roommate about what you had just seen? Maybe we're going to find out the answers to all of those. Hopefully we will, even at the prelim. But it is certainly, at the very least, confusing behavior, because like Marie said, we're all wondering what could have been done in that time. If not save lives, perhaps even capture him earlier on if they were able to alert police as to what just took place.
Yeah, there's no doubt that her testimony will be key when this trial begins. All right, guys, thank you for that analysis to start the show. With that, we're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere, because we're going to take you to the anti-freeze murder trial in Wisconsin right after this.